Hello. As promised, I wanted to give you a video to clear up some misconceptions that I noticed from the Attendance 1 discussion board. The biggest problem I saw, content-wise, was with inverse functions. So I wanted to go over the inverse function lesson a little bit. So that was in week 2. So inverse functions, the first thing I want you to know about inverse functions is they're not a type of function like a quadratic or an exponential or a logarithm. An inverse function is a broader concept. A function like an exponential function has an inverse function, which is the logarithm function. The quadratic function, y equals x squared, if we restrict its domain, it has an inverse function of the square root of x. So I wanted to distinguish between inverse function as a concept versus a classification of a function, such as quadratic, linear, etc. They're two different things. Another thing I wanted to talk about was how you approach these lessons in this first module, since it's so graphic in nature. And I think the place you want to start from is the lab manual. So hopefully you have this downloaded. One thing I noticed from the discussion board are the page numbers are off. So if you look at the PDF viewer, this is showing the page number 28 because it's counting the cover page and the table of contents, I assume. Where actually the page number in the lab manual itself is 26. So when you post to a discussion board and do a lab manual problem, refer to this page number down here. Now, the whole point of an inverse function is undoing what a function does. So what we're going to talk about in the Desmos lesson and the interactive lesson is just the whole concept of what an inverse function means relative to an original function. So if we go to the interactive lesson, it's telling us that an inverse function reverses the ordered pairs from an original function. So if this is my original function, x squared, the square root of x is the inverse function. Notice that the x and y values of the corresponding points are reversed. So that's looking at the ordered pairs. Now if you look at the picture or the graph of a function and its inverse, a function's inverse is a reflection of the function across the identity line y equals x. And you'll notice that that really is the visual manifestation of these ordered pairs being reversed. Notice the x coordinate here is the y coordinate here, etc. So I could have an inverse function or any given function and have its inverse, but have no idea what the equation of the function is. So for example, I have no idea what the equation of this function f of x is, but I know that g of x is its inverse because it's the reflection of it across this line y equals x. And I can verify that by clicking on these points. So now let's go back to the lab manual. So let's look at number 3. It says, use each graph to sketch the graph of its inverse. Include the identity line. I have no idea what the equation of these graphs are, so I can't go put them into Desmos and find the inverse some way. But I can observe points on each graph, sketch the reverse of those points, and then draw the line y equals x to verify that I have indeed drawn the inverse graph, even though I don't really know what the function is. So when someone posted on this problem, they didn't get the inverse function correct, but I think they were confused on how to graph it on the discussion board. You don't know the equation, so how do you put it into Desmos to graph it? So notice that it says sketch the inverse function below, include the identity line y equals x on your graph. So for a problem that asks for a graph when you don't know the equation, in this case, you could just sketch it in your lab manual and then use the snipping tool to paste it into your post.